Put on your mental track shoes and run with me. This is the Powwow with Myra. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Powwow. Today we have Miss Jill Clifton. Jill, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Uh, you know, funny. I'll just usually I'll start with like for you to introduce yourself, but I really want to have the honor of like saying that Jill is the person I bought my home from. And, I don't think it's very common for buyers and sellers to kind of meet their sellers and then still kind of have some sort of connection. And I feel like for us there's been this unspoken like I feel like I care about you so much, and there's we have no type of history, no mutual connections other than now our neighbors.
Right.
But I'm really excited to hear more about your story. From what the neighbors tell me is that you have a wonderful story, especially a love story. Um, so not only just that, but I would definitely love to learn more about you and your kind heart. That it's so hard to explain, but it's like such a feeling that you just have a feeling, right? So I don't know. Tell you, how about you tell me a little bit about like yourself and you
Okay.
know.
Well, I grew up in Dallas Fort Worth. I actually grew up in DeSoto
Mm,
and went to high school there, and married pretty young and had kids pretty young. And when that um, stopped being, I was single for a while. But I got in. My very first job was at a savings and loan.
it's okay.
And so I started at the bottom. I was a receptionist and did all kinds of things and learned the business that way. But my story really began when I was doing mortgages and originating loans and meeting people and meeting realtors and that kind of thing. And I know you're a realtor, and that's one of the reasons we connected very well.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. Uh, but years ago, when the mortgage business seemed easier then, there was no technology, but there was a lot of connection of people, and
Mm,
so you stayed in contact with the buyers from a mortgage perspective, uh, very much more than I think people do today,
mm,
because nothing was done on the computer.
right.
And so I did a loan for a couple who they had combined families, and I asked them. I said, "Well, how did y'all meet?" And they had worked together. And I said, "Well," I laughed and I said, "If y'all ever dig anybody up, holler at me." After my divorce, and so about 3 months later, I got a phone call, and they said, "Well, we found you a guy," and and I'm like, "Yeah, right." And so anyway, the long and short of that is they had a housewarming party at the house that I had handled the financing, and um, Charles was invited, and we met and really dated no one else. That was his divorce had only been final for a little over a year. I mean, a couple of months actually, and uh, and so when we met, it was kind of an instantaneous thing. And I said, that was one of God's answers for being in this mortgage business because it's crazy. And I've been through the ups and downs multiple times, but it brought me the love of my life.
Mm,
So, sorry, kind of close to heart.
very much so. That's
And
beautiful.
and this house was, this was the last house we bought together, and so you talking about that connection, and it really was, um, because I wanted somebody who wanted this house, and that was you and your husband and then sweet baby coming later. So I was thankful that y'all could enjoy it and feel it and love it as much as we did.
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing.
It was, and people for years I've always thought that people like ministers and nursing, medical people and teachers are called to their profession. But this was a sign that I was in the right job for me,
Mm.
that I connected with people and um, and so I think that's part of my success.
Yes, yes, I can totally see that. And Logan, if you don't mind, getting me that box of Kleenex, please.
Who,
Already.
who knew? Who knew?
Well, it's like it's like I would say more like happy tears, right? Because it's
Sure.
so eh, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. We'll share. So and it was that person, and you connected with him immediately, and so then what happened afterwards? Did you guys just
Well, he had only been divorced a month or two, and I'd been divorced for quite a while, and we had goals, but if we hadn't had children, he had 3 children and I had 3,
Mm.
and he was older, and so his youngest and my middle child were the same age, and so it was we could if we hadn't had kids, we probably would have been married within a couple 3 months. But because we did, and responsibilities for them and financially and all of the things that you consider when you decide to move forward with a life together. And so we dated for 3 years, and we were ready when we got married, and um, I mean, it was everything.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the kids, were um, they were cooperative, I should say. I'm sure we
Mm.
had moments that we didn't know about, or they had moments that they didn't know about sharing lives and us being together. But all in all, the family stayed united and,
Mm.
and and that kind of thing, and we were blessed.
Yes, yes, that's so beautiful. What would you say what would you say like what were your biggest like connection moments like with him, like the values, or it sounded like it's communicated very quickly, which I can relate a lot with Logan.
Hmm.
When we met, I was still not technically divorced
Hmm.
yet. I had told my ex that I actually told him that I needed time, but when I told him I needed time, I knew
Hmm.
like it was it.
Yeah.
Um and so we used to work together actually for a corporate
Hmm.
company, and I told my coworker at the time, she was, as a matter of fact, just the last guest, is still not live yet, but they're missionaries now. So, she's
Hmm.
very into
Hmm.
God, and so she helped me throughout that stage of my life. And then I was sharing with her at work how I had told my ex that I needed time, and that, kind of broke up the
Hmm.
first step, you would
Hmm.
say. So Logan and I had been working there for 11 months, about in the same area, different job
Hmm.
responsibilities, but we were in the process of transitioning to a bigger place. The company had just bought another company. We grew like overnight over 1 million customers, and so there's a lot of shifting inside
Sure.
the company, and I ended up kind of where he was. But long story short, he starts talking to me all the 11 months that we had been feet from each other, like 10 feet from each other, never spoken. I think we spoke like twice. And that
Wow.
was like, Logan was like, hey, is it okay if I use the speaker once everybody in the office had left?
Hmm.
I'm like, sure. And I think something else at some point, but didn't even say hello
Hmm.
or goodbye,
Hmm.
and we're like just 10 feet away probably from each other.
So once that happened, Logan starts talking to me and I'm like, okay, well that's kind of weird.
Hmm.
But cool, right? And then shortly after we start dating and like 3 months after, um, we he moves in with me.
Hmm.
And we start, and so but it was like that quick connection, and at first I'm like, well, I don't know, this could be, I was just getting away from a long-term relationship. I'd
Hmm.
been with my ex for like almost 8 years from dating,
Hmm.
and then it was interesting. We just connected and we knew, and he actually got kicked out of his mom's house because he was spending too much time with me. So I'm like, well, I guess you can help me pay half of my mortgage.
Yeah.
So come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, so I can relate it in that we didn't have any kids at the
Yeah.
time, neither him or me. So we're like, okay, yeah. So we technically kind of moved in within like 3 months
Wow.
of when we started dating slash seeing each other.
Yeah.
so you just never know, like, the timing.
Well, and timing is everything. During that same time period, my mother was in the last stages of pancreatic cancer,
Mm.
and so probably I had met Charles maybe a week or two before, but one of my brothers, I got to the office one day, and one of my brothers called me and said, "Mom wants to talk to all of us." And so one of the boys lived in Weatherford, and one was in North Dallas, and I said, "Okay, I'll be there." And so I immediately left and um, got got there. Well, by the time I got there, she was not talking. She would have very long periods of time where she didn't say anything. And so I had been sitting at the kitchen table with her, and she'd just stare at me. And I was talking, and I said, "Mom, I met this really nice man," and talk about connection. I mean, I went to the Baptist church and grew up in a Baptist, and he had the same, he grew up the same way, and he was a Baptist, and the three kids and the three kids, and this, that, and the other, and I said, I was telling him, "Hey, Mom, he goes to church, and this, that, and the other," and so she just sat there for hours, and almost at the end of the evening, it had been nearly 8 hours. And she said, "What church did you say he went to?" And I'm like, "Well, he goes to, this one." And so anyway, it was a connection.
Mm.
And I knew she heard me. I mean, somewhere it took her that long to process the information. But that's one of the things that we talked about when we made the decision to get married. And I mentioned it at his funeral that, God knew.
God knew.
God knew. So um, I was, uh, the term equally yoked, I think that's very important when couples get together, and especially when you have children, that you have to have similar values and similar desires, and we did.
Oh,
And he that's the way he grew up, and that's the way I grew up, and um, so it worked.
yes,
A few
yes.
tears and heartache over the years, but all in all, uh, I- it's repetitive, but we were surely blessed.
Yes, yes, and timing is such a funny thing, but it's like that. I guess that's why there's a saying like God's timing's always perfect,
Perfect. Mhm.
right? And so that would make sense. Now you mentioned you married early. How young did you
I was
marry?
19.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was 19 when I
Uh-huh.
first married
Uh-huh.
too.
Yeah. I dated my ex in my senior year in high school, and then a year after I graduated, we decided to get married, and uh, and our first child was born a couple of years later. So you never know, but reality was we weren't equally yoked,
Hmm.
and so um, that causes conflict, and the you'd like to think that you can work through all that conflict, and um, I wore out.
Mm.
in you know, my faith. I had people that felt like I stopped too soon, but I knew that I'd reached capacity, and I know that if our Lord punishes us for making those kind of decisions, I'm okay with it. I'll take it because I did it right the second time.
Yeah, that's a great way to see it. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and what would you say some of the learnings, or like as far as when you found Charles, you mentioned like values are important, which I 100% agree with all that.
hmm
Um, what would you say, like, as young, like, when we're young, when we're like 19, 18, we're dating those years, um, th- like, do you think we don't think about these things when we're that young, or what do you think, why do you think sometimes we make decisions when we're younger, and it's easier to said hindsight
Sure.
2020, right? It's easier to look back and say these things, but like at the moment, what would you say, especially for like the young people that might be listening to the podcast?
Well, do as I say and not as I did. That,
Mm.
but um, I don't think people go into situations thinking it's going to fail. I certainly did not. Um, but at some point, you go, I can't do it any longer. And but the things that you have to look for, there's probably red flags, and those red flags went up for both of us at different times through the time that we were married. But we ignored them,
Mm.
and I think he did as well. And so, I there's it doesn't become an issue of blame. It becomes of you're young and you think you can overcome these things, and sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
Mm.
And so that's where we found. But and then I dated several men after my divorce, but the difference is when I met Charles, he canceled a date to go see. Think of it in a minute. Um, oh my brain just died. Uh, Sweet Caroline guy. Can't think of anyway. He canceled a date because his son was playing in a football playoff out of town. Well, that's exactly where he should have been.
Mm.
You know, he just hardly knew me. He knew me for 2 months, um, but he needed to be where his son was, and for
Mm.
that game. And so
So he canceled the date with you
yes,
to go to his
because
son.
his son was still in the playoffs
I
for
see.
football, and I didn't think anything of it. I would have thought it weird had he not gone to see his son play.
I see.
And so I knew if he puts his children first that way, that he will treat me the same way.
Mm.
And such a respect and a value that he had and was, and of course I teased him over the years, well, I didn't get to go see Neil
Right.
Diamond. Neil Diamond.
Neil
How could,
Diamond.
how could I forget? That like I didn't get to see Neil Diamond,
Yeah.
but we laughed about it, but that was the way he was, and so he wasn't because in that weekend, the weekend my mom died. I mean, he never met my parents at that point. I mean, it was she died a month after we met in a playoff game. And he goes, "I'm so sorry I can't be there." And I said, "You don't, it's okay, And so not to set wrong expectations,
Mm.
but also know that there are limitations especially when there are other people involved. And he respected me for that, and I did him for that.
Mm. Wow.
Which carry it over to business. It's the same thing.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. Were you guys in the same business industry?
No,
No?
he had been a teacher and coach
Okay.
his first career. And then I met him through the guy that worked for the steel mill in Midlothian, and Charles worked there. And worked there and started out in the mill. He rolled steel, and then he became a trainer and then a sales rep for them. And so he had a great career there. Um, but that's kind of how that evolution. I didn't know him as a teacher and coach,
I see.
but we were on a trip. Um, our a trip to Italy,
Mm.
and it was a bus tour that WBAP Radio, one of their personalities, sponsored or hosted the trip, and so we went, and we were the last day of the trip. There were 2 busloads of people, and you knew most of the people on your bus, but you knew kind of by glance the people on the other bus, but you didn't hang out with them because you weren't with them very often. And so we were on this boat ride at Lake Maggiore in Italy, and this couple was sitting across from us, and the man said, "Are you Coach Clifton?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, I am, Charles." And it was one of his former students and his wife, and they were both former students of his. And Charles, he said, "Well, I'm such and so," and Charles said, "Oh, well, yeah, your dad built all the fences in our subdivision when we built our house. That first house or the house he and his ex-wife built." And so he remembered all that and talked to these, and they were delightful. And as we were walking off alone, he said, they were I didn't lie, they were really good kids. And so he was a very good coach and teacher, and that family, I wish I could remember their names, but they were very good kids too.
Oh,
So
a small world.
very small world
In Italy.
in Italy.
Sitting right across.
And they've been on the trip for it was like 12 or 13 days we were gone.
Wow.
And you get on and off the bus and load up and do all the things that you do on that kind of a trip. But the last day, and we were so it was such a delightful thing to happen.
Oh, yes, for sure. And that says a lot, of your husband. It's like the students. I mean, especially if you think about when, I think about like when I was a student, and I mean, not every teacher, you don't gravitate to every teacher.
Correct.
Every teacher might have their students they may connect
Hmm.
with,
Hmm.
and the students they may help, but when a student remembers, the teacher and like the good memories, I feel like that says a lot.
Absolutely.
Especially from students.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those kind of things are confirmations.
Yes.
That's what he did.
Mm.
And I mean, he did it some at the steel mill when he was teaching and doing, they had continuing education program for the worker bees there, because that's how they got raises.
Mm.
They got hourly raises for completing certain courses and that kind of thing
I see.
on continuing education. And so it helped promote the staff.
Yes.
And so, the fact that students connected with him is another reason. It's just that was the man he was.
Yes, I love that. Now, you had 3 kids. Were they from your first marriage?
Mhm.
And so, okay, so once you divorced, how old were your kids?
See, the oldest was when we got married. We got married in 91, and so Lance was 15, and then 11 and 9.
Okay, so that's pretty rough age. It's
Mhm.
like you have teenagers and about to be teens. How did you break the news? How did you and your ex-husband break the news to your kids that, hey, this is not working out?
Well, I was divorced for quite a while before we.
Oh,
So
before you told
they were
him?
young
Okay.
before. Yeah, I mean, we were divorced for several years.
Before they knew?
No, I mean, we were divorced um, uh, before any man that I dated was introduced to my kids. But I had been divorced when I met Charles for quite some time.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So,
probably 6 or 7 years. So it had been quite a while. My youngest was about 5 or 6 whenever Robert and I divorced.
oh, okay, 5 or 6
Yeah,
when
the
you
youngest.
okay.
So in boys tend to follow. I mean, my boys had some difficulty adjusting. Um, my daughter Charles became her dad. Their dad passed away pretty young, and so Charles became for sure Rachel's dad.
Mm,
And the boys were close, but they weren't. They
as
weren't
close.
real close. And the same with his children. I mean, the youngest, his youngest when we married was 11 or 12, and the oldest was in college,
Mm,
a freshman or sophomore in college. So that um, they tried to be grown ups. I mean, we got through. It was just this is the way life is, and families do it, and we were able to get through it, the
right.
bumps, and
Yes.
we had more um, level playing than bumps. So
Well, it has that probably has to do with the personalities, right? Like,
hmm
yeah, I mean, it might be hard at first, but if you're in the right mindset, especially if there's like the intention, right? I think I always fall back like on the intention of why people do what they do. If there's good intention, it's something that I think it's more felt more than anything, and so
yeah,
it makes everything else kind of
yeah.
easier,
And
softer.
I think as my kids got older, and Charles is probably as well, they recognized the big connection.
Mm,
You see all the blemishes of the other person. When you're younger.
yes.
Well, this and this and this, um, but the connection and the longevity.
Mhm.
We we were able to celebrate 27 years married, and we dated for 3 years before that. So to me, I had 31. However that 30 years together, almost
Beautiful.
just a few months shy. So our children, um, when they became adults, they figured it out.
I think when we all become adults, we figure a lot of things
Yes.
out, especially as, you know, I became a mother like a year and a half
hmm
ago. And I feel like I could understand a lot more or maybe understand, maybe it's not the worth, maybe empathize or
hmm hmm
understand or have a little bit more um I would say what's the word I'm looking for? Compassion,
Yes.
maybe some things that we didn't understand or we
hmm
judged before, or
hmm
why aren't things this
hmm
way? It's like we start figuring out, like, okay, well, life is definitely not as easy
It's not as easy.
as we think it could be,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, well, if I'm an adult, I could be doing this, or it's so easy. But then you become an adult, or years start going by,
hmm
and it's like, okay,
Yeah. Finances and those kind of things. You um, get a grip
even
on them.
right, and even like figuring out who we are as we're growing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um you know um when you're younger, you're going with the flow. You're in school, you're around a lot of people, and the new trends, and every different life stage is different, and
hmm
even every year's different. But and as you start getting responsibilities, and maybe not going out every weekend, and try to figure out or try to set your life,
hmm
put it together, then you start kind of encountering these challenges.
Sure.
And then I feel like, how you handle these challenges is it's kind of what starts making you who you are.
Yes, you become a grown up. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's
Yes.
maturity level. I think, and that's um, even, at 19, I was so immature, it wasn't even funny when I married the first time. Um, Probably, I was 33 when we married. Uh, or no, I was 36 when we remarried, when Charles and I married. And, I still had tendencies because I grew up with four older brothers. I was the baby. I was the princess. I I could do no wrong if you asked my dad. Now my mother would tell you the truth, but my dad would not. But you know, um, you finally figure out. One day I said, my dad told me my whole life I was the princess, and I said if I were really a princess, I wouldn't have to pick up my clothes, but I do. So
Mm.
um, somehow it finally soaks in that the world does not revolve around Joe Clifton. And that was a rude awakening, but you have to get there sometimes.
Yes, we all have our awakenings in one way or another, right?
Hmm.
So how was your experience, I would say, as a single mother, for a brief period of time? Like, how was that for you?
You know, well, I was single for um,
7 years, you
yeah,
said
5 or 6 years.
about.
It was tough, and if I not had wonderful parents, I would have it would have been worse.
Mm,
Um, my parents lived in DeSoto at the time. My ex stayed in DeSoto. I stayed in DeSoto. So we were all there
mm,
together. And um, you know, I when you go into sales, which I did at some point while before Charles and I married, and um, it's all consuming. I mean, you know that. I mean,
mm.
and I had drive and I had knowledge, um, but I had to build a business. And so that was the hardest thing with the kids was, you know, the daycare getting a phone call that I'm late or, whatever. And so I do have regrets in that sense that there were many times that trying to make a living came first
Right.
back in those days because I had to make a living. And mom and dad helped. They would pick them up if I was going to be late. And the technology. Uh, I got a car phone at some point, but I couldn't afford it most of the time, and I had it unplugged in the receiver in my trunk of my car because it was ridiculous how expensive it was, and pagers and the connection. But I was driven to succeed,
Mm,
and so I was fortunate that I had the brain power, and I worked for people who had confidence in me,
mm.
and a couple that didn't have confidence in me and told me I couldn't, and that made me. I did.
Yeah.
So uh, you learn those things, and probably to the detriment of the kids at times because I was so focused on that.
Yeah. Well, I think I think at the end of the day, it's like it's how do I put it? Like money is not everything, but it surely does help,
You have to make a living.
and it creates options
Yes,
um to create a better life,
absolutely.
anyways, right? Did you know what you wanted to do after, say, you graduated from school?
Well, I happened into the savings and loan and got hired on a Friday afternoon. Um, um, so that part I liked people and I grasped concepts quickly, and I wasn't a bump on a log, so I was able to learn quickly. Had some great teachers that one gal I'm still dear friends with today. She is a prayer warrior and a half, and and has prayed for me for a long time, and I for her. But but I learned from a lot of really good people,
Mm.
and then my ex and I separated for a little bit, and so back and forth, and then in between the kids, and I worked, and then I didn't, and the girl that trained me hired me back when my youngest was about 2, and and my the trajectory of my career started, and not in sales at the time, but learning, and then just did some of everything. You
Mm.
know, Jill of all trades and master of none, or whatever that saying is. But I learned a lot,
Mm.
and I wanted to learn more, and so that kept me gave me options.
I see. I see. Who did you have anybody in particular, even maybe even as growing up, that inspired you or that you looked up to? Um,
My parents inspired me. My parents, uh, my mother was one of 10 children. They grew up on a farm,
mm,
didn't have running water. Um, you know, uh, they were sharecroppers. Her parents were sharecroppers. My dad, um, uh, his parents, I don't know as much about them, but they were all from this area. They both grew up in Ellis County, and they had a work ethic.
mm.
And of course, Mom stayed home with us. She finally got a job when I started 4th or 5th grade, and it made me really mad because then I wasn't the center of attention because she was going to work. But she took typing classes at the YWCA in Oak Cliff off Hampton Road, north of Illinois.
Mm.
And that's where she took typing and learned to type. She could type about 25 words a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. And she got a job. And when she retired, she was a supervisor. And so it's like, my mom finished 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade, but she was smart. And she was driven and wanted to do a good job. And I was so proud of her. And my dad, he was a supervisor. He started out with Sanger Brothers, and that became Sanger Harris, and then became all the other derivatives later. But he was actually a painter. They built their own um, shelving, and did all the remodeling stuff, and had it in house at Sanger Harris. And so he did that and was a supervisor, and they just worked, you know.
Mm.
And so they were the inspiration. Um, Lots of other people were contributed, but um,
They were the
they
main
they were the
ones.
ones. I mean, I loved my friends' parents, and some of them way more educated than mine were, because I was the baby of 4 older brothers. My oldest brother was 16 when I was born,
Mm.
so I was, my parents were older than all my friends' parents, but they were loving, and taught me right from wrong, and took me to church, and so I was blessed in that way.
Did they teach any particular I feel like and I ask this because even thinking of like the differences sometimes between like now how kids are raised or how we see anyways maybe how kids act in public, sometimes I feel like there could be a lack of respect just from a third view party looking, say you go to a game or you go to high school, and or even hearing feedback from teachers,
Mhm.
and I feel like sometimes I feel like now more than ever in the past, like respect, it's something that was very important back in the day, and now respect seems that word just seems so loose.
Today it's underrated.
Yes.
But the thing that my parents taught me, and to the detriment sometimes of people in that age group, they were lived through the Depression
Good point. Right.
in World War II, and my dad did not go. He had a heart murmur, but during that time, and my brothers, we the younger brother is 4 years older than I, and he and I really had a different set of parents than our older three brothers had.
Mm.
My dad was a pretty big disciplinarian for the older three, and they had their moments and got had issues. Um, the youngest boy, he was the easiest going of all five of us, and I never saw him get in trouble. Now I got in trouble some, but not to the point where I got in trouble at school. I knew there was a line I couldn't cross,
Mm.
and I think part of that respect is that you respect enough not to disappoint.
Good point. Good way to put it.
I didn't want my parents to be ashamed of
Mm.
me, and I think that's some of that is missing today, certainly. And I had it with some of my kids, at times that they thought their opinion was more, um,
Superior or
yes,
yes.
valuable than what we had. And my kids we were raised, they were respectful, um, for the most part, and for the most part followed rules. I mean, kids,
For sure. We
issues.
all yes, yes. I mean, all of us kids at some point we like to test those boundaries.
Absolutely. I one of my next to the oldest brother, uh, he's unfortunately he started smoking. My parents didn't smoke. I think my dad smoked when he was young, and then mother made him quit. But my next to oldest brother was a smoker from the time he was 12 or 13, and of course he died at 51 of lung cancer.
Mm.
And it's like he said I could quit drinking, and it was so much easier than smoking, not smoking.
Mm.
And so but he didn't he never wanted to, as rebellious as he was over the years when he was younger and different things in his life, he didn't want to disappoint our parents.
Mm.
And so I think that's um, where we've got some issues, and we have to do a better job of when you teach Maddie, you don't want to be you don't should not want you to be disappointed in her ever when
Right.
she's 18 or 19.
That's a good way to think about it.
And so um, that I don't know that I thought ahead that way.
Mm.
Um, Now I can look back, hindsight 2020, and see I should have been more this demanding of one of my kids and this, that, and the other. But you love them,
Mm.
and timing and all of those things come into play. But I think that we can see today um, that there's a lot of a lack of respect,
Yeah, right. Right.
in our world, unfortunately.
Right. I agreed. Agreed, and that's something I always kind of like ponder around and especially like most of the people that sit here, I feel like that um there's a common theme here with how much value respect was, growing up
Hmm.
and more so kind of like back in the day. So, I wonder now, even as a mother, it's like, okay, how can I raise my child to the best of my ability so she grows up to be the best version of herself?
Right.
And I feel like when people are respectful, even to those who are not, I think that says so much, and I think it opens so many opportunities, and ultimately just live a better life,
Hmm.
but then that is the question, right? And as you were saying, like, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I never really thought about it that way, but truthfully, as you were saying that, I could remember as a teenager even, other friends asking me to do things that I knew my parents wouldn't be proud
Mhm.
of, and all the time I would say no because I thought at the moment it was fear, but there was really not much to fear because even my mom and I was raised by who I call my dad, but he
Mhm.
was really my stepdad.
Mhm.
I think he came into our life before I even had memory, like I was a year old or something.
Mhm.
So he was my dad,
Yeah.
we called him dad.
Yeah.
And both of them, I mean, every time they just they told us, like, when we did something bad that we never got spanked.
Mhm.
They would say, "Okay, you sit here and this and don't move till I tell you and think about what you did." But
Mhm.
we never got abused either physically or verbally. Like
Mhm.
they never yelled at us,
Mhm.
hit us, anything like that. And I always thought maybe it was fear, but fear of what? And as you're sitting here saying that, I think it was more so it was my own fear of failing them or disappointing
Sure.
them,
Sure.
which is really interesting.
Mhm.
I never really thought about it that way.
Well, I think our society, it's every generation. I mean, it's not just today's, but our society tends to ignore the old and go for the new.
Mm,
And so youth is very important, and it always will be important. I mean,
right.
we have to have it. But um, I spent a lot. I had one grandmother growing up, and she lived to be 95, and and I spent a lot of time with her. Even when my mother was working and I had kids, and I would go down and visit with her at times, and I learned a lot from her. She spent a lot of time in the Bible.
Mm,
She was a snuff dipper. I hated that. But she was a good person. She would ridicule people, women who smoked, but she dipped snuff. So you got to have your vice, and that
right.
was hers. But I in one of my mother's sisters was very close to and stayed with my parents some off and on. And she reminded me of something because my dad would talk about what happened years ago. When I was did this or when I did that, and he'd start
Right.
telling a story, and I'd say, "Daddy, we've already heard that story," and he'd go, "I know, but I want to hear it again." And so I'm like, so that's what I tell my grandkids. I know you've heard the story, but I want to hear it again. And so it's if we repeat them enough, they can find the value.
Mm,
The other thing that I find is missing with a lot of people, and that I value God's majesty in your face, in your baby's face, in the face of my husband, in the face of my kids, in the mountains in Colorado, and the red rocks in Utah, and in Zion National Park in Utah, and the Grand Canyon. I mean, what a better name than the Grand Canyon? All of these things that God made,
mm,
and my parents taught me to appreciate that.
mm.
And one of the and I lost the verse in my daily Bible reading, but I did write it down. One of the things was, "Draw me nearer to you, Lord, so I may see the glory of your majesty." Pretty powerful. And so that's something my dad taught me uh, to love and to uh, my brother. I have a brother, the oldest living brother now. He's got some Alzheimer memory problems, and when in the 40s, Dad would go west to Arizona and Utah, and the Navajo Indian Reservation is there. And he picked up a gentleman that was crippled, an Indian gentleman, and took him somewhere, And so Dad and he corresponded over the years. And um, his name was Jim Maloney. And I remember Daddy telling me about it. And Jim's wife evidently weaved blankets. And so she they sent Dad, it's probably a 24 by 24 square Indian blanket type thing. And it was beautiful. It was turquoise and red and black. And, it was just beautiful. And so after Dad died, my brother got it. And so I've been telling him, if you run into it, because I've moved a couple of times, I said, if you find it, let me know, because I would love to have it. And so we finally found it. Now it is so faded and it's so dirty right now, but I'm going to see what I can do and see if somebody can maybe help do something with the dyes in the wool. But I remember my dad telling me that story a million times about Jim picking up the crippled Navajo Indian on the side of the road in the late 40s. And that's what he did,
I got the chills.
Or if the preacher was coming by, and the preacher probably made a lot more money than my parents, but they got $20 or they got $50 or Dad always had something. He wasn't a demonstrably, he didn't get up and read the Bible. He didn't get up in church and pray. He was very quiet, very unassuming, but he loved people. And so he wanted to help. Yeah. And so, everybody's got a gift. And another thing that the Bible teaches us, we all have gifts. We just have to find it and use it the way God intended us to use it. And so those are the things that I learned from my parents. And certainly it helped me not to want to disappoint them. And helped me to figure out how to get my kids on that track 99% of the time or 80% of the time or however often. But that, the goal is to succeed and to have a good time. The Lord wants us to be happy and wants us to do right and live well and support others. And that's what we've tried to do.
Wow, that is so beautiful and so admirable. Just hearing you say and speak of like those lessons, just like I feel it, like I've been touched. Like that's so beautiful to carry on forward and to keep
Absolutely.
pouring it on to as many people as we can. For example, with us, it'll be our kids, right? The people we'll have probably the most impact on.
Sure.
Right. So thank you for sharing those.
But the influence you have over everyday people, not just your children, the influence that you have, you never know what it's going to be. You in real estate, if that's your primary job, I mean, you get to know your clients and you understand what they need and what they want, and there's a difference,
right?
And you connect with them, and those who are good at it connect better than those who are not as good. And I think that's the couple that. I mean, they were combined family. Both had Stinko credit. Both had all kinds of stuff going on, and we got through it. I said, I think I can get this done if you'll hang in there with me. And then look what I got as a bonus. I made a commission, but look what I got as a bonus. I got my husband in my life.
Priceless.
There was a realtor in Grand Prairie, and he's long since passed, but he was a tough guy, and he called me one day and wanted me to talk to a couple. They had been declined by somebody else, and this family had 5 kids, 4 daughters and a little boy who had cerebral palsy. And this was the most beautiful child you've ever seen. His eyelashes were about 2 inches long. I mean, he was just a precious little boy. And the mom told me, said, well, we're hoping to get this house because the house we're renting doesn't have air conditioning and he's asthmatic. Well, my 2 youngest children were asthmatic. And I said, we'll figure this out. And I had a great underwriter, Mary Leaper. If you're still alive, I love you still. You taught me more things than I'll ever, than anybody probably about underwriting and graciousness. But I went and I took her the file and I said, this is what I think. And she helped me figure it out. And, the day I took the keys to the borrowers and the lady just cried. And, she goes, I just can't thank you enough. Well, I don't remember their name.
Right.
But he worked for American Airlines. He had been an airline mechanic in the Air Force. And he went to work for and the 5 kids, and I remember that little boy. And so those things impact me as much as they do them. I mean, I was as blessed, probably more blessed, and that you go, okay, this is why I continue to do it.
Right.
And so I don't know. I just think things come full circle, and you and Logan being tuned into your kid, your little girl, you in knowing, and going into it with more knowledge than you would have had at 19, right?
Yes, 100%.
And so you figure it out, and it's not always easy.
Right.
And when she's 17 and she's, got choices to make herself, she will fall back on what your mother and your dad are teaching her, what Logan's parents teach, and what you guys have taught. And then she won't want to disappoint you either.
That's a great way to put it. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Those words are just wisdom. It's music to my ears.
Well, I think it's lucky on my part because I wouldn't say wisdom, but thank you. That's a very big compliment. Nobody's ever accused me of being too wise, but I have been blessed and very fortunate.
Yes, yes. And how did you get in the mortgage industry?
Well, it was just a savings and loan. We did loans there,
Oh, and that's when you worked your way up.
yeah.
Okay.
And there I worked for a gentleman. I'm sure he's long since passed. I won't use his name, but he was the Archie Bunker of lending. He was pretty bigoted and male chauvinist pig. And I grew up where women did the grunt work and the men made the money, and I managed to figure that out and succeed in spite of it. But I learned a lot from him too, because he acted like I couldn't do it. And it's like, don't tell me I can't, 'cause I will.
Right.
So,
There's that fuel.
yeah.
Yeah.
And my husband Charles and my dad never told me I couldn't do something, and that's why they were so special to me. And
Ooh.
really, my brothers were the same way. They all kind of knew that I would end up doing what I should do and be able to accomplish something.
And when when I met you, you were the director of the lending or the
Well, I managed a group, yes,
Okay.
and so I've had several jobs over the years, but when you and I met, I was working for Cardinal Financial, which
Mm,
is a fabulous company,
agreed.
and if I had not retired, I'd still be there if they'd have me. I mean, they would, I think. Um, Wonderful people, but um, I managed a team, and our group called on a real estate firm, and so again, we developed it, we worked it, and made people our friends, and that's how we succeeded.
And that's a whole nother set of skill. Like, it's one thing to know the job and know what to do and do it right. And then there's that. And then there's transitioning it to teaching others and managing
Hmm.
others. Um, how was that transition for you? Was it pretty natural, or what were some of the things that you didn't expect managing other people?
Well, I think the great thing, and I've managed at several different places and at different levels. The most recent at Cardinal was I was at a wholly lower level than I had been at
Mm,
before, but wanted to step down in responsibility from what I had. So I have managed, but you manage the relationship just like you manage your relationship with Logan.
mm,
He manages his relationship with you. Y'all have you make it work, right?
right.
Well, we all manage in some way or another, and the
Mm,
people that worked for me managed me too. But we had a mutual respect, and I think again, you get around to um, you trust and you respect, and and some people you can follow, and some you can't.
mm.
And I there were people that decided they didn't want to follow me, and we parted ways, and or vice versa. I decided that there were things that I couldn't follow, and I parted ways over the years. I mean, I did the job since I was my first job was I was 19,
Right.
so long time, and because I'm considerably older than that now, if you didn't know.
I couldn't have guessed.
But anyway, you there's somebody for everybody. I think that's
Mm.
it's like a marriage or a job or uh, picking up shoes. Why do we try shoes on? Every size 9.5 doesn't fit my foot, and so you try them on and you figure out, does this work? And this is what I want, and does this give me the support I need? And then you go on and say, yes, that's what I want, or no, I got to look for another pair.
Great metaphor.
Mhm.
Great way to put it, and that is true. I think as you're saying that, it makes sense because even at jobs, it doesn't necessarily mean that it could be that just that person is not meant like for that job. Like, it could be you might be painting, but really music is really what tickles, your belly. Is
Yeah,
like, it's just you're fun, it's just it depends on so it makes sense, like, okay, well, maybe it just didn't work out, so it's just learn. But I think it's important to know when to part ways versus
hmm,
wanting to just kind of like in a bad
control.
relationship, stay in
Yeah,
control,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's and you you figure out you can't control other people, especially adults. And in our business, hopefully everybody's behaving like an adult.
Yes.
Um, but their business today is so difficult. Um, it can be made difficult, but it's not the work, it's the people,
Mm,
and knowing how to work with a different set of people or a different, this isn't my strong suit on correcting somebody,
right.
or and when you've had a team together, we had a I had a team for a long time, and sometimes you get lackadaisical, and which was meant for me. It's time to step down. Somebody else needs to take this and run with it,
Mm,
and so I'm thankful for the time that I had. But when I knew it was time for me to say goodbye, it was time.
mhm.
And so another one of my dad's sayings, he told my brother, said, boy, when you get ready to retire, you just need to be happy doing nothing
Mm.
because you're so used to being motivated by the work, and be happy in what your circumstances are.
Mm.
And and it's been a bit of a transition for me, but you look at it and could circumstances be worse? Absolutely.
Mm.
And could they be better sometimes? And I wish, but all in all, um, you know, I again I just have to look at the blessings I've been given, and I'm thankful for that, and move on down the road. You know,
Right. Yes, for sure. And um, one door may close, but I think other opens. For example, now from our earlier conversation off the camera when we're eating, it's like now you're spending a lot of time with your
grandson.
grandson. And, it sounds like he may not know it now, but in the future, even him and his mom,
Hmm.
Rachel, who's also a loan
Hmm.
originator, it's like the value, it's and the blessing. It's hard to quantify, or it's hard to see it really sometimes in the moment, because even now as we're speaking, I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to be more grateful, even for having my mom and my aunt who help us do everything that we do,
Hmm.
by them helping us with our daughter.
Right.
Because at this point she requires, as long as she's awake, she needs eyes on her, because
Exactly.
other she'll be jumping on,
Hmm.
climbing on everything. And and plus she likes the attention too, so she wants us to see what she's
Sure.
doing,
Yeah.
right? So which is all great, but it's like it's having them. I think sometimes it's easy to take it for granted when there's all this other noise
Sure.
around us,
Sure.
right? So it's a different stage, I'm sure, but I mean, just putting myself on Rachel's shoes, on how, what a just what a blessing mothers are
Oh
to
yeah.
us.
I couldn't have um, done what I did, and Rachel's a single mom. So, I mean, the kids are older, but having a special needs, it's, we can't leave him by
Mhm.
himself. He couldn't get help. So those kind of things, you're tied to it. And so, where, but I had my parents that could pick up the kids when I was running late
Mhm.
and make dinner for them, and this, that, and the other. And so, being able to do that for my grands now, and especially with him, is a terrific blessing.
Yeah.
And it's a lot less complicated than worrying about what your credit score is and what the interest rates are today.
Right. And who the next president's gonna be,
Yes,
and the
whatever.
economy. You're right. Fill in the blank.
Uh-huh.
Yes, right, for sure, for sure. So so it's good. Like, so now it's not these loans you're working with. Now it's like it's your family. It's your, and
Exactly.
well, we also don't give enough credit sometimes here to our pets.
Yes.
And so, you have a baby at
Yes, I
home,
do. A little baby Fiona.
Fiona, and she's what breed is
She's a
she?
Labradoodle. And
Labradoodle.
I picked her. Um, my grandson, one of his favorite movies was Shrek.
Mm.
And so, and he mimics. And so he would say something and he'd go, Shrek, Fiona, Shrek, Fiona. And so I wanted a red puppy, and so I thought, okay, I got to name her Fiona.
Yes.
And so he doesn't do the Shrek Fiona stuff anymore, and he's not a dog person. He's not really motivated by animals, but Grand Jill is, and so I have enjoyed having the dog, and she's also a blessing to the household.
Yes. Yes, for sure. They definitely feel a gap.
Mhm.
Um like I've had a dog since I was able to move out of my mom's,
Mhm.
because my dad at the time, he didn't like dogs inside. And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to have a dog and keep him outside."
Mhm.
So the moment, I moved out on my own, then we got a dog and had dogs ever since.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? I don't know. They just bring so much joy.
They're part of the family.
They are.
Mhm.
Yes. And Maddie loves them. She loves Harvey. She
Mhm.
she hugs him, and she's 30 pounds, Harvey's 140,
Mhm.
and she disciplines him. She no, go Hobby. Go Hobby. So, and it's like it's so beautiful. It's those little moments
Oh,
that are
yeah.
just priceless.
Yeah.
And she goes up to them and hugs them, and it's just so cute. And not to mention the joy they bring to us personally.
Absolutely.
And just having some another living body there. It might be
Yes.
a dog, but
Yep.
it's definitely a companion.
Absolutely. And that's most of my day.
Yeah. Yeah. I see, Jill. Oh man, so it's it sucks a little bit that I'm running short on time this time. I think I can sit here and literally talk to you another 2 hours, 3. But I'm sure we can do it again sometime
Well,
in
I
the
would love
future.
to. This you've made it easy, and hopefully I didn't bore you. But just
Oh,
remember, if I tell the story again, it's because I want to hear it again.
I would want to hear it again too. I see the value now of hearing it over and over, so I wouldn't mind it at all. Now every episode I end it with 2 final questions, and one of them is, or the first one is, what is the greatest piece of advice you've ever received?
I think finish what you start.
Oh,
Finish what you start.
I like that. Wow. And the second one is, what is your personal definition of happiness?
Wow.
Because happiness is, there's a word for it, but then everybody can think of happiness their own way.
The memories to sustain and a future to look forward to. I think that's happiness for me.
That's so beautiful. Memories to sustain
Hmm.
and a future you look forward to.
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for being here. I'm sure it's probably not the easiest thing to walk into a home where you probably had lots of memories. I can tell you that we love this home very, very much,
I can tell.
and I'm so grateful to know you and to
Me too.
have you here. And we'll keep it going, right? We'll keep
All
it
right.
going.
All right.
All
You
right.
made it easy.
Thank you. Well, all right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.